A disability is something that has a major impact on your life.
Every disability is different.
And it's never the same thing for two people. I am blind in my right eye totally and partially sighted in my left eye.
I was 18 years old. We were traveling way too fast on a gravel road. Broke my neck, my back.
My Asperger's syndrome and my cerebral palsy.
I have anxiety and depression. People would have no idea just talking to me.
Being independent means different things to different people.
I want to live in my own house. I want to pay my own bills.
Live independently and not rely on other people.
When someone is not able to live as independently as they can, it does have a detrimental effect on people's physical and mental well-being.
It's no complicated thing. It's just that people with disabilities want to be included.
Plenty of people get stuck in ruts when they feel like they can't overcome something in their life. That's where LIFTT comes in.
Living independently for today and tomorrow. LIFTT. We help people of all ages and all types of disabilities find the resources or acquire the skills to live as independently as possible.
We serve the southeastern 18 counties here at the Billings office. We have a variety of things that we offer. We can help with grant funding for adaptive equipment.
Maybe a home modification so they're able to access their home. We help people to find that funding.
Helping people apply for Social Security benefits.
Medicaid, Medicare, housing.
They have a peer support group. Peer support, I think, is key.
Sharing life experiences is one of the most powerful things to help people who might be new to disability, who might be struggling with their disability.
Youth transitions is kids that are transitioning out of high school. They need to learn those adulting skills. It might be rent an apartment, learn how to grocery shop, budgeting.
Help someone advocate for themselves in a school or an employment setting. One of our biggest strengths is providing folks with information and referral. If we can't help you, we hope to know who can.
A lot of times we'll have a potential consumer call in and they think that they just have one need, and it turns out that we end up finding 3 or 4 things we can actually do for them.
You can just come in and say, hey, I feel like I have this going on. Can you help me? And we can, which is so cool to me. I love that.
Most of us on staff at LIFTT have identified ourselves as having one or more disabilities. That is helpful in many cases.
It's easier to empathize with someone when you yourself have struggled with a disability.
This is what we specialize in. This is who we are, and this is what we do.
And it costs nothing to go to LIFTT. It's a nonprofit organization and they're there to help.
Somebody that was a consumer that was working with LIFTT was asked to do an art project. He visualized that the balloon helps to lift people up. And then it became the logo, and it's stuck.
There's been success on all kinds of levels.
It's really rewarding to have a consumer go, hey, I was able to do this by myself today.
We want people to live their best life as independent as possible.
Live as everyone else in society and live as a part of society, not apart from society.
Everybody needs help. Sometimes you just need a little more help, and that's okay. That's absolutely okay.
There's plenty of life to live still, and there's a way you can do it. Keep chipping away at it, little by little by little.
Knowledge is power. Let's share it, for crying out loud.
Send us an email, give us a call. We'll do our best to help.
We can definitely help figure out what your needs are and get started on that. We're one of many steps in the path to independence, and we're happy to be serving people here in the community.
Good day and welcome to Living Well in Montana. Living Well in Montana is a program of living independently for today and tomorrow, LIFT, L-I-F-T-T as we like to call ourselves. LIFT is what is known as a Center for Independent Living. We are a nonprofit source of information, resources, and advocacy for people of all types of disability at any age across our 18-county service area in southeastern and south central Montana. For more information about LIFT, I encourage you to visit our website at liftt.org or give us a phone call at 406-259-5181 in Billings, or for those of you in the eastern portion of our service area, 406-948-8500 will connect you to our office in Glendive. My name is Jed Barton, and it is my privilege to be the public relations specialist here at LIFT and the host of today's show. Just this past Saturday was the 35th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. We had a community celebration here at our LIFT Billings office, which we hope many of you had a chance to attend in person or at least view some of the live coverage of the speeches and presentations provided by our good friends here at Community 7 TV. The ADA remains our focus for today's program as we welcome Emily Schuman, the Executive Director of the Rocky Mountain ADA Center, to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome, and we'll start with the basics here. Could you please explain what is the Rocky Mountain ADA Center?
Absolutely. So the Rocky Mountain ADA Center is one of 10 federally funded regional ADA education, guidance, and support centers. So we're funded through the Department of Health and Human Services, and the Rocky Mountain Center serves all of Montana, as well as 5 other states in the region. And we exist simply to provide, information and guidance on the ADA. So if a person needs to understand what their rights are under the ADA, or if a business or, a government agency needs to understand what their responsibilities are under the ADA, we can provide that information. We have information specialists on hand to answer questions during the week, whether that's by phone or via email. And we also have a few other services like providing training to organizations when they need that, providing materials for folks who need to have, like handy pocket guides, at the front desk or whatever the case may be. We do some research and we have a really robust social media presence. So we try to stay connected with all of the members of our region that way as well.
Okay. Yeah, it is a large region, including Montana, includes Colorado, both North and South Dakota, Utah, and Wyoming.
That's correct.
We talk about windshield time here at LIFT, just covering the southeastern, south central quadrant of Montana, but you guys must spend a lot of time on the road.
A lot of time on the road, yeah, and we're operated by the University of Northern Colorado. So Colorado is kind of our home base. Most of the staff work remotely from our home offices through various locations in Colorado, but we get out to all of the states in our region regularly. We're traveling pretty much monthly and have been to Montana, countless times over the years.
Right. I think you guys have been to LIFT a few times.
I'm sure we have. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So information and you said is a big thing about what you do. So what is a typical sort of information request that the Rocky Mountain ADA Center handles, if there is such a thing as a typical?
Yeah, I mean, so we definitely run the gamut, right? So we get calls from all different types of people and situations. Our number one kind of category of caller is a person with a disability or a family member of a person with a disability, a caretaker or family member. And usually with these calls, people are wanting to understand, what are my rights? Like I'm in this employment situation, something feels not quite right, or I'm not quite quite sure what to do here. I know I may have some rights, but I'm not totally clear on what those are. And so that would be kind of a typical request, is just helping people understand, okay, here's what the ADA requires, and then here's what you can do, the steps you can take to access those rights that the ADA provides to you. So whether that's requesting an accommodation, sending an email to an HR person, speaking with an ADA coordinator at a government office. So we just really help people understand, what the ADA applies to, what the limitations of the ADA are, how to move forward with accessing those rights. And then, if people feel that their rights have been violated, we can often point people to the applicable enforcing agencies. We can help people understand if there's a grievance process at the agency they're working with or organization they're working with. So we don't do any enforcement ourselves. We're strictly education and information. And we're not really an advocacy agency either. So we really just, we try to stay very neutral so that we can help both people with disabilities and, businesses and government agencies understand ADA compliance, why this is a win-win for both parties, right? Why this is important for organizations as well as people with disabilities. And I think it's important to also note that anytime someone contacts us, our services are free and confidential. So you never have to worry about your information, information that you provide to us getting out there or being shared inappropriately.
Okay, that's great. A lot of people don't know, sort of the basics of the ADA beyond, July 26, 1990, and that it's a federal civil rights law. Maybe we can briefly, if I remember correctly, there are three titles.
Yeah, there's
five titles. That's
Mhm.
right. 5 titles of the ADA, and that each covers a specific sector of either private entities or state and local government. Maybe we could.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, the ADA is a federal civil rights law. So, as a civil rights law, it provides a legal guarantee for citizens with disabilities that they should be free from discrimination and mistreatment on the basis of disability. So, that's kind of the overarching goal of the ADA. It's a non-discrimination on the basis of disability. It also provides some requirements that the sectors that are covered by the ADA should take extra steps in order to ensure equal opportunity for people with disabilities to participate in their programs or enjoy goods and services. So the 5 titles, so the first title is employment. So that has to do with what the ADA requires in employment settings. So employers that have 15 or more employees, have to do things like provide reasonable accommodations for employees with disabilities, making sure that they can equally enjoy that employment opportunity and the benefits of being employed, at that organization. Title II is for state and local government settings. So if you go to the county office, if you go to the DMV, if you're going to a state university, your local school district, public library, all of those would be kind of considered a state or local government entity. And that includes even like your county jail or your state prison. And so there are some non-discrimination and equal opportunity requirements there as well. Title III is what we call places of public accommodation. You could also think of this as like businesses, both for-profit or nonprofit. So, this would be your hotels, your banks, your museums, your, restaurants, anything like that, right? Just any place where the general public can go, and usually there's some exchange of commerce, goods, and services. And so very similar to Title II, we've got some requirements around non-discrimination and, equal opportunity to participate and enjoy those goods and services. Title IV applies to telecommunication, and so there are some provisions in there making sure that people who have communication disabilities can, equally access things like emergency services, emergency broadcasts, making sure that there's captioning, in critical areas, making sure that things like relay services are available. So if a deaf person needs to make a phone call, there's a free service that they can use to do that. And then the fifth title or fifth chapter in the ADA is called Miscellaneous, and it really lives up to its name. It's got, if things like who enforces which parts of the ADA, how the ADA interacts with other laws, some various exceptions for the ADA, so it really just kind of does have those miscellaneous, whatever was left over got kind of chucked into that chapter.
Okay, thank you. It seems like the ADA does cover quite a bit of ground, and so you've got folks on staff at Rocky Mountain ADA Center who answer questions about each of these various pieces and parts of the law.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this is true of all of the 10 ADA centers. We have information specialists on hand who, that's all they do every day is they just answer questions. Most of the time the questions will be so familiar to them that they'll know the answers right off the top of their head. But sometimes if it's a very complex question or it involves some overlap with other laws, we may sometimes need to do some research or reach out to our, network contacts to get you the best answer. But we will certainly find those answers for you. We have certain people within our organization who specialize in certain areas. So like I have one person who is, her specialty is like employment and everything related to employment. I've got another person, Chris, who is kind of our physical access specialist. So if you need to know something about the built environment, he's the person who's going to answer those questions. And then if it's not an ADA related question, because sometimes we do get questions that are like related to a part of life that the ADA doesn't cover, right? So housing or, air travel. So we do have a great network of referral resources that we keep on hand. So we spend a lot of time referring actually to independent living centers because sometimes people have questions that are more like, hey, I need some advocacy or I need some peer support, right? And so, or, I'm concerned about living independently in the community. And I want some, I want to understand what I can do in my home to make sure that I can stay independent. So each of us are sort of trained and understand to listen for like whether this is a question we can answer or if there's another organization that's better suited to answer the question and then make those referrals accordingly.
And as you mentioned, there are 10 of these regional centers throughout the country. Focusing on our region, are there, there are obviously universal things about the ADA and about disability, but are there things you guys notice in our Rocky Mountain region, Rocky Mountain Northern Plains region that come up that don't come up for your colleagues in other places and settings?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think that's why we do have this regional breakdown because, the needs and sort of, the culture in one region is going to be vastly different than what you've got going on in another region. So, obviously what happens in Montana or in North Dakota is very different than what you see happening in California or New York. So in this region, it is a very big geographical region. So we're very spread out and we're dealing with a lot of rural communities. And we're also dealing with a pretty low population for the amount of space that the region takes up. So that creates some unique challenges with just like getting people together, to learn, what's required and how to best support community members with disabilities. That can cause some challenges. This region in particular, you have a for the most part, maybe a more conservative political climate, which sometimes means that people are a little bit more hesitant to get too deeply involved in civil rights, or they just kind of want to do the bare minimum of what's required and maybe are not super interested in going above and beyond and thinking about kind of the next phase or the next step in inclusion. That's not universal by any means, but I have seen that kind of come up from time to time. And then, there's some resource challenges, right? Where like sometimes when you're in these smaller municipalities, smaller towns, a lot of times people just don't have the same amount of funding or resources or even staffing that, some big city in California, for example, might have to be, or even Denver, right, might have to comply with the ADA, to have big teams of people who work on ADA compliance. So I think those are definitely some unique challenges that we see within this region.
Thinking about you mentioned that you guys do trainings. I've had the chance over the years to participate in some of your trainings. What do you train on? What are the topics that you most often conduct trainings with SILs and other organizations on?
Yeah, so we train really on all aspects of the ADA. So we pride ourselves on providing what we call customized training. So, if an organization contacts us, they can really tell us, we need training on these specific areas, or we can have that conversation and figure out the best, combination of topics to train on. I would say some of the most popular topics lately that we've trained on have been certainly related to digital accessibility. Understanding how to make our digital environments, our documents and our websites accessible to people with disabilities. This has become more and more popular because we've had actually some updates within the ADA recently that's going to make it so state and local government entities have a stricter requirement around digital accessibility. So we're getting more requests for training on that. We get lots of requests for training on just general disability awareness and etiquette. So looking at those attitudinal barriers, treating people respectfully, and just understanding the disability landscape. So, what is the prevalence of disability? What does it mean to be disabled? And then sometimes we get, various other requests for things like, disability inclusion in like a museum environment, or, working with, I've had a couple of trainings recently where I've trained animal control officers on service animals. So it really depends, but depends on the organization, what they're interested in and what they need. But, I would say we offer training on any aspect of the ADA, but we do have to stay kind of within that ADA related scope.
Right. And that's important to note, that as vast as the ADA is, it is a limited scope, and that there are other laws and other entities that come into play when we deal with disability aside from the ADA. But the ADA is no doubt one of the most important pieces of the puzzle in the lives of those of us with disabilities. And again, 35 years of the ADA, that's almost my entire lifetime. I was 6 when it went through. So what does it mean for you every day to work, very closely with this law and to see how it's evolved, I guess?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I have spent my entire career working in the field of disability, right? Starting with direct care on through case management, working with home and community-based services, host homes, things like that. Workforce development for folks with disabilities, so getting people employed and in education, and then into the ADA Center. And of course, throughout all that time interacting with disability and getting to understand the ADA so deeply, I've come to understand that I too am a person with a disability, and I've got some non-apparent disabilities, chronic illnesses. And so, I think I'm a good example of what we talk about all the time, which is that disability is likely to impact every single one of us, whether we know it or not, whether we realize that we are, disabled or feel, whether we resonate with that label, or whether we just understand ourselves as people who are chronically ill, um, or whether we just get a disability as we age or have to care for somebody with a disability as we age. So I think for me, like you said, 35 years of the ADA, it is one of the youngest civil rights laws out there. But we've now got a whole generation and a whole, people who are full grown population of people who are full grown adults who have come to expect that the ADA will be there for them, which has been really, really great to see because, I think people who lived, through some adulthood before the ADA, um, after the ADA was passed, it's like they were just so grateful that there was something that they didn't push too hard, right? Sometimes they just let things slide, they were just grateful to have, whatever you can give me, that's better than nothing, right? But I think now with this new generation of people who expect the ADA, um, we're holding these organizations to a higher standard, and we're saying this has been in place for 35 years, and we expect that this should be a no-brainer at this point. So I think that 35-year milestone is really important, and I do think, I've seen some attitudes change, even in just my 7 years with the ADA Center. COVID really brought about some new awareness of the ADA, and then this digital accessibility piece is really exciting. That's an update that the ADA has needed for a long time.
Indeed. Emily Schuman, Director of the Rocky Mountain ADA Center, thank you for joining us on Living Well in Montana today. With just a minute or so remaining, how do people get in touch with Rocky Mountain ADA Center?
Give us a call, 1-800-949-4232, or visit us at RockyMountainADA.org.
Great. Thank you, and thanks to everyone for watching Living Well in Montana. Again, Living Well in Montana is a service of Living Independently for Today and Tomorrow, LIFTT, LIFTT. You can reach us at 406-259-5181 or on the web at LIFTT.org. I'm Jed Barton, and everyone have a good day.